Well, for a long time, Nigerians have clamored for politicians who are as excellent technocrats as they are adept in politics. The country needs its brightest and best minds to progress, and the 2023 elections is throwing exciting characters and people of outstanding personalities and rich resume into the ring. My guest today on the show became a chartered accountant at 16. In 1997, he graduated top of his MBA class at the prestigious University of Benin. He didn't end there. With over 30 years of research, portfolio management, and significant experience in financial advisory, private equity, and corporate finance, he's one of Africa's most respected investment bankers and a leader and major player in West African markets. He's a partner, director, and leading investment banker across many major companies on the continent and the world, where he has rich experience and outstanding knowledge of finance and markets have seen him reach great heights. Today, he's held leadership roles in the finance and business sector and was a director at one of Africa's leading commercial institutions. He was first vice president at ARM, and today he's here to speak to us about his political journey and aspiration as he vies for one of Lagos State's seats at the House of Representatives. He's a member of the African Democratic Congress, a technocrat, and a legislative hopeful. Welcome to Politics HQ, Olufemi Oladehin.
Hi, Sulaiman. Absolute pleasure.
Well, good to see you, and thanks for making it down live to the studio. And, you know, politics sometimes, that's the whole essence of actually bringing the resume before you now. It's changing. Time was when a lot of people wouldn't want to see bright minds. I recall then in 1999 we saw some few bright minds who came into politics, and today some of them are still doing good. But we woke up someday and it looks as if it suddenly disappeared. It became an all-comers affair. Speak to us. At what point did you started thinking or nursing the idea of going into politics?
So interestingly, right, the first time I voted was in 1992. The governorship elections in Lagos. I was 18, well, just before my 18th birthday. And, you know, it was quite an interesting election because it was the first time when we had the option A4, where you had to queue behind a candidate. And something interesting happened in Lagos during that election. Lagos had a legislative arm that was completely, everyone was an SDP candidate, and the governor was from NRC, simply because they had some political horse tradings and they never could reach a deal. And for me, that was my first introduction into representative politics. Obviously, the military truncated that process, and in 1999, again, Nigeria started the process. Now, when you think back, one of the biggest triggers for someone like me is that Nigeria's had democracy now 24 years.
Yeah.
In 24 years, you've had a brand new generation of people who effectively were born in 1999. Today, they're probably going through the second election cycle. In a 24-year period, you've seen countries also move from third world to effectively first world. So when we look at Nigeria's journey for 24 years of democracy, and we compare where we are today to where we could have been and where we should be, you just realize that there's such a huge demarcation. And without any iota of doubt, the biggest weakness that we've had as a people is leadership. The quality of leadership that we've had, the quality of the debate that we necessarily need to have to be able to even establish and say, what is the direction, what is the future direction of the country, and how do we get there? The reality is that what the politicians have done, interestingly, over the 24 years, is to impoverish both the mind, the capacity, and the wealth of the people, which means that those people are always beholden to them because they're the only ones who hold, you know, both political and economic power. And as a result of that, the average Nigerian only thinks short term. What can I get from the politician now? Because I know he's going to be useless to me for the next 4 years until the next time he needs my vote. So that impoverishment means that the electorate never look at the quality of the candidate before they vote.
And do you think it's deliberate? Because if it's not, then even if the man or the woman believes so much on the now, then you as a politician should ensure that you make them see the long-term effect of good governance.
Well, I think, look, there's a Latin saying that says nemo dat quod non habet, right? You can't give what you don't have. I think that genuinely, those people are just incapable of envisioning that future and being able to sell it to the people. And that's been a problem. Look, Sulaiman, I grew up understanding that we had something called a Vision 2000.
Yeah.
You know, and health for all in 2000. Everything was for all in 2000. 2000 came and went. There was no one ever asked questions. How come we failed Vision 2000? Then there was Vision 2020.
Yeah.
You know, they celebrated it with all pomp and everything. 2020 came and, you know, nothing had changed. Now they're talking about 2050, 2030. The reality is, again, when the people have not been able to go past on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, past the basic needs, food, shelter, food, shelter, and healthcare, right? Their aspirations are never going to be beyond the now. So if we give them those basic things, where the man knows that he can get a meal, a good 3 square meals a day, he can get a living wage, he can feed his family and house them, he starts to think outside of now, you know, because the next meal no longer is a problem for him. He's now thinking, what can I do next? What are my aspirations? Am I happy with the quality of life that I have now? And should I be aspiring to have more? Do I have legitimate grounds to actually want more than I'm getting today? And I think that systematic impoverishment has resulted in even voter apathy. When you look at the last elections in 2019, the current government in Lagos State won elections with about 720,000 votes. The total number of registered voters in Lagos at that time was 6.3 million. So there were at least 1 in every 6 voters who stayed at home because they just couldn't be bothered. They couldn't see the connection between political leadership and their lots in life. And as such, they didn't have a horse in the race. There was no incentive for them to go and spend 12 hours of their day out there under the sun trying to cast a vote. You know, and I feel strongly that if we're able to give the people that sense of being part of a country that cares about them, that cares about their future, that cares about their children, we can actually start to find the kind of leaders that will deliver those things for them.
Sorry to cut you, Danny, brings us to the kind of leaders. But when we talk about finding the kind of leaders that can actually deliver the good to the people, some of the key concern is the emergence of these leaders through the political process. Now, I'm talking about the political parties process. Sometimes the good men don't get the ticket.
Look, I think that's true and that's correct. You know, I've watched the political parties. I you know, on the periphery, you know, I used to have an affinity for progressive democracy. So if I thought a party's ideology was progressive, I had an affinity for them. You know, so I would say in a place like Lagos, initially I did have an affinity for the ruling party in Lagos. You know, but when you understand the way the average politician thinks, right? And when I say average, I'm picking using that phrase, you know, somewhat loosely. But the way the average politician, especially in Nigeria, thinks is that they're very short-termists in their thought process. So it's about winning the next election. It's not about sustainable growth. It's not about building the foundations for a sustainable economy or for a sustainable country. So because they think that way, they're always going to make compromises that are to the detriment of the people. So when the 2019 elections happened and the outcome of the elections became clear to everyone, we saw who won, who lost the elections, and you started to watch the new government implement its policies, right? And for someone like me, I just kept sitting down in my house thinking, how did we get here? How did we get here? How did we get to the point where the policies were not well thought through? Even where they were well thought through, the corruption around the system meant that the value, the end value that was delivered to the people was compromised. You know, and eventually, look, Sulaiman, the truth is, we can all sit down in our offices, make some good money, and be happy. But the reality is that when you have an emergency, a medical emergency, what is the first place you're going to think of? It's not the state government hospital. When you have a medical emergency, you're not going to call the Lagos State hotline. Oh, come get me, I'm having a heart attack. The first place you're going to think of is a private hospital. But we pay taxes in Lagos. We earn our living in Lagos. We have spent, someone like me, I've spent probably all of my life in Lagos. So the expectations start to change because you are not even, you're lucky, you're not on the lowest rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You're getting towards the 5th rung and you're asking yourself, how can we do better? Is it the system that's corrupt or is it the people? The reality is that even if the system is set up for corruption, a good man can fix a corrupt system, can show people the leadership that's required to fix a corrupt system. So for people like me, we have two options. Do you join the current political structures that are already compromised? Compromised in terms of structure, compromised in terms of leadership, compromised in terms of even how do you vie for political positions? Because if somebody doesn't say, yes, you are a good enough candidate, you never even get it into the room to speak. And that decision was a very easy one. You can't win by joining them, because if you join them, the system they've built is structured to perpetuate whatever structures they've put in place. So for us, it was very simple. We needed to find an alternative platform. And it's not impossible to build an alternative platform if you are focused on your end goal. Our end goal is to fix Nigeria, not just for ourselves, but for our children. And if we're going to fix it, we just have to start one way, you know, and that's been the motivation.
Now let's dig in deep and talk about your party, African Democratic Congress, and and off the top of my head, if I put the acronym ADC, and you know, if you don't listen carefully, it could also sound like APC, maybe. So perhaps speak to us about ADC. We've had conversations with Shore. I beg your pardon, to your governorship candidate here in Lagos State, and the conversation we've had looking at ADC will mean as if the Lagos people are already looking towards some conversations you're having, but you are not the governorship candidate, and that's one area I'm excited about. A lot of people still do not know that the most important aspect of our democracy is the legislative arm. And today on the headline, very big news on the headline, sad one at that, is that the autonomy of local government has been shut down by those in the National Assembly.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is because of the absence of a proper checks and balance. So people will be asking probably when you go around Lagos, Femi, when you get in there, what truly do you think can change?
So, Sulaiman, you know, at the end of the day, we need to build a country that can be sustainable. I did follow the news about the LGs, and it was such a heartbreaking outcome. But you've seen that play out over the last 24 years. You've seen it on a consistent basis play out. What happens is that the quality of people that get into the legislative arms are so bang average at best, to the point where, again, like I keep saying to you, they can't think beyond the current term, the current 4-year system, the current election cycle. And because they can't, they can never be progressive enough to say, does this really make sense for the country? The local government should actually be the most important arm of government. They are the closest to the people. They are the ones who can deliver the basic primary education, primary health care, the basic things that you want to deliver. But guess what? The local governments have also always been the petty cash, the imprest system for the governors. So the governors sponsor the people who go to the National Assembly to a large extent. They control the narrative of those guys when they get there. So those guys are never thinking about the good of the people that voted for them. They're always thinking about the good of the political class whose patronage they're enjoying. So there's no incentive for them whatsoever to think about the fact that if we empowered the local government officers, if we put structures in place to hold them accountable for every income that they were getting, and that they were deploying that income to the benefit of the people, that the people benefit from it. So you as a state governor who's sitting in the state capital has no clue what is going on in Badagry, have no clue whatsoever, have no clue what is going on in Ekpe, have no clue what is going on in Yanokwaja Abulegba, because you simply can't. The closest person to the people is the local government. And you see, let's not even put it at the local government level. It's just about how do we craft the laws that govern how the country runs.
The laws?
Yes. We've been trying to change our constitution or amend our constitution. Every single National Assembly, this is the 6th or the 7th one, every single one has made attempts to amend the constitution. They would pass a few of those votes in the National Assembly. But when it gets to the state houses of assembly, usually dies a natural death. Why? Because first and foremost, the people who you're expecting to debate intellectually the impact of constitutional changes on themselves, they don't have the capacity, because the system has literally just thrown up a guy who has been following a politician for years and say, okay, it's your turn. Let's reward you with a State House of Assembly ticket. And then the guy gets there, you engage him and you're thinking, how in God's name is this guy representing me? What does he even understand the impact of the policies that have been made by the state government, and can he be a check on that state government? So if we don't start to understand that it's not the governor that's the most important person, it's not even the president sometimes.
So when you go around, do you have that kind of conversation with the people? Because sometimes two things here. When you speak to the people, there's every likelihood that they'll be asking you to do things, asking you of things that falls within the purview, fall within the purview of the
state government,
of the executive, and some of the times they're also pushing you to the point that you just may not be able to give them some of those answers as to what a legislator can do or should do. So, you've been campaigning. I'd like to have a sense of that conversation, because it looks as if the people are a little bit, consumed by the frenzy of the presidency jumping over the National Assembly and perhaps come back to the governorship.
So I mean, look, the easiest conversation to have is when you're vying for political office at the executive level. It's very easy to say, look, I'm going to be your governor, I'm going to do this, and that. When you get to the legislative arm, it's a bit more intellectual. Now,
I want us to take that again. When you get to the legislative, it's a bit more intellectual.
Yes.
So it's not a sleeping room.
No, it's not.
Okay, now
let's go. Let's dig in deep. Sulaiman, the guys don't even know what you do. So they're like, what, House of Rep? So what can you do for me? And you have to almost spend time educating them and saying, look, you see that guy who's your governor, the guy who's president, he can act with impunity if you don't have a set of people who are there to protect your interests. The closest person to you is your representative.
And again, I take you back. Apologies. A set of people. So you need the numbers of a set of good people to be in the assembly.
Absolutely. It's such a, look, for you to be able to pass any law, there are specific thresholds that are required, the number of votes. So you're not going to show up in the National Assembly with your highfalutin great ideas and think it's just going to happen. you're one of 360 federal legislators. Which means that you naturally have to engage, you have to trade, you have to convince people who have ideologies that are probably set in the 60s, and you're saying to them, this is 2023. You know, we can't continue to run the government the way we're running it before and expect different outcomes. But you know, coming back to the conversation around how do you engage with the people, the reality is that it's about drawing a nexus between their outcomes and the policies that government puts in place. It's that you can explain to my grandmother and say, Mama, you know, when the government does X, Y, Z, the only person that can stop them from implementing that policy is your representative, if it's injurious to you. But if you put someone who's going to be a rubber stamp to the executive, then all you're going to get is they're going to run roughshod over you. And that's what's going to happen. And that's what we've had. This perhaps is this current National Assembly has been the most pliant National Assembly we've had probably in Nigeria's democratic history. There's never been any time where they've said, you know what, this is not the route we're going, we're challenging the executive. Even the Electoral Act. They couldn't stand their grounds on the Electoral Act. The president literally just bullied his way through and signed the Electoral Act, despite the fact that the National Assembly had issues with it. So the truth is that we need to get to a point where the National Assembly actually acts the exact role that was expected of it, which is an oversee of the government, is to ensure that every policy that government is making, they first and foremost even defend it. You know, that's for me is the biggest problem. Look, we're dealing with what I would call probably the worst economic crisis that we've had in a long time. And part of it was part of some of the policies that were taken by bodies that are affiliated with the executive. You're asking Nigerians that you're going to change currency. You give them 6 weeks to swap out currencies. Today is the 25th, 7 days before your deadline. ATMs are still spitting out old currencies. And nobody is saying anything. In any other society where the legislatures or where the House of Representatives or the Senate are actively involved in the running of government, somebody is going to be summoning the CBN governor to say, show us that you've actually put policy in place.
Well, I think not standing in for the National Assembly, but to some extent, I think that they've just asked that it be extended to June. But the problem there now is because over the years, since they've not given cause to show that they've been speaking for the people are in doubt as to why they're asking for the extension. Some are saying,
is it because you have
of your elections coming?
Yeah.
So the people are not even giving the legislators the backing. So now it comes again to, I'll come back to lawmaking again, but again, let's talk about this trust in those we have so elected, and specifically the National Assembly. I really want us to talk about the importance. Nigerians must know that it is the most important aspect of our democracy. And the question next should be, how do we get the people to really understand? Because when people have been made to understand about roads, hospitals, I will build roads, I will build hospitals, and you come in, you can't sing the same song of I will do. How difficult or otherwise can it be for you to explain this to the electorates or the would-be electorates?
Sulaiman, it's very difficult. And it's very difficult because it goes back to what I said at the beginning. It is the impoverishment of the electorate. It's as simple as that. The electorate have been so impoverished that they don't even, the last thing on their minds is laws. They don't even understand what it means. They don't understand how it impacts them. They just wake up one morning and say they're changing the currency, or they wake up one morning, VAT is now 7.5%. But there's no rigorous debate that involves them. You know, there's none. The constitution that we have today, no one contributed to it, not you, not me. The military effectively handed us a constitution and said to us, run. every country that has had sustainable democracy, the people play an active role in the formation of the constitution, because it is the people, it is we the people that should write the constitution, not something being handed over to us. So the truth is that because we've so impoverished the people and put them in a position where they don't even know. So in Ethiopia, for example, the House of Assembly person would basically buy a few buses branded with his name and say courtesy of me. Now, in all honesty, it's not his job. He calls it empowerment. It's not your job. If you held the state government accountable and you pushed policies that would encourage those sorts of interventions, you don't have to do it yourself, or you don't have to take state resources and brand it like you are the one who's doing it. So you see, as long as we have a people that are poorly educated, poorly educated politically, and they're not invested in the political system, we're always going to have this problem. Look, Sulaiman, I gave you some statistics. The fact that 1 in 6 people in Lagos stayed at home during the last election. The reason why those guys stayed at home is because they don't trust the system. They don't trust that their votes will count. They don't trust that even if their votes count, the person who has been thrown up by the political parties is the best candidate for the job.
Has that changed?
Look, I think in the mainstream political parties, I doubt if that has changed, because, again, you still have a political godfather who determines what happens. We saw it in Ethiopia. The person who is a candidate today for one of the political parties didn't win his primaries. Someone else won the primaries, but the political leadership said, well, you need to step down for the guy who lost. So you can see, and that's why people like us would never go into that system, because the system itself is rigged against people like you. It's best for us to go into a structure where at least you're building from the ground up, and you can then ensure that the culture of that party is to allow open debate, allow representative democracy. If you're able to convince as many people in the party to back you as a candidate, then that's fine. It's not about one person saying that's our candidate, let's vote for him.
Now, Femi, let's talk about Ethiopia.
Yes.
How well do you know your area? And perhaps that should also explain if you understand the needs of the people.
So I moved into Ethiopia in 2005. So I've been living here since 2005. I've participated in every election, actually organized every election since 2007 in Ethiopia, depending on where I'm living at each point in time. And my office is in Ethiopia. I work in Ethiopia. And I live here. My kids go to school here.
So should you win, so you're not going to be one of those who don't stay with, amongst the people?
I mean, I live here. This is home for me. There's always a conversation about who's a Lagosian and all of that nonsense. Someone asked me that question during we had some campaigns at the weekend. And I said, who is more invested in Lagos? My home is here. My family are here. My business is here. My church is here. Everything I own is in Lagos. So I'm as invested in, my parents were not born here, but I was born here and I've never known any other state. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm from Lagos. But that being said, the truth is, Ethiopia is one of the most interesting local governments in the whole country.
In the whole country?
In the entire country. First thing is, it is the economic capital of Nigeria. So we talk about Lagos, but the reality is between Ethiopia and Lagos Island, you have the political and economic capital of Lagos.
That means you're in for a big fight.
Look, I understand that clearly, but the truth is, Sulaiman, you never win if you're not in the race.
So are you winning with the conversation you're having? You think you're winning? So
the interesting thing is and I'm going to say this, I know that everyone is listening, and there are a few debates that we're going to have between now and election day. Look, people know what is good for them. The system may not have given them options prior to now for them to be able to look at the options that they have and say, oh, you know what, this person I can trust. But the people know. When you speak to them, they look at you and they say, you know what? I like what you're saying. And what sets you apart from them is that you're not like them.
They say that?
Clearly say that to us. They said it to me a few times on Saturday. I mean, like every time. People are like, you're not like them. I like what you guys are saying. Let's try something else. Let's try people who've built their own businesses and haven't used government patronage to enrich themselves. Let's try people who understand the problems of the common man and can empathize with the common man, not for the purpose of using them, but for the purpose of making their lives better. You know, and if it comes down to that, I think that the passion that you see from people like me is that we just want a country that's better.
And does this conversation also involve the markets? Have you been going around markets?
So I visited every single market in Etiosa this weekend.
I love market conversations.
With my governorship candidate.
So how has it been speaking with those?
Look, extremely interesting conversation. So the first thing that happens when you get into the market is, first, when you mention the name of the party, people are confused and like, APC, ADC. I'm like, no, African Democratic Congress, ADC. And almost immediately, they want to listen to you. So it's almost like one of the most interesting things that struck me going on that trip on Saturday is that the people actually know that the current political structure in Lagos is not meant for them. Yes, you see those market women at the rallies that they do, they're coerced to be there.
Coerced?
Yes. It's more like they're threatened to be there. Say, oh, if you don't come, we're going to lock your shop. Look, we got to one of the markets on Saturday, and we had an interesting incident. As soon as we were coming into the market, there was a guy who was like, we're never entering this market. Nobody wants us here. And it became a skirmish, you know, and he was like, no, you're not coming in. No other party. It's just us.
Did he say why?
Because I mean, look, the truth is that there's a hegemony that's been entrenched in Lagos. It's a political system that reaches the trenches, that goes all the way from the top. It's a patronage-based system where the small warlord, look, Sulaiman, I'm going to finish that, but let me tell you what, if you do a poll of Lagosians and tell them what is the biggest problem they have, you would not believe what it is. It's area boys. But guess what?
Doherty and I, we had that same conversation.
This is statistical. We actually did a survey. What is the biggest problem they have? It's the illegal economy. Because that illegal economy contributes to the pains that they have on a daily basis. When they get to the point where they're going to get into transport, there's a guy who's taking a tax. When they get to the markets, there's a guy who's taking a tax. Those things directly impact the cost of living of the average Lagosian. It's funny, but it's true. So when we got to that market, it was obvious what was playing out. It was again the same structure that was looking for a way to prevent us from talking to the people. But that was not the story. As soon as we made entrance into the market,
finally got it.
We were not going to back down. I mean, Lagos State belongs to all of us, right? We were not going to back down. And as soon as we got into the market, Sulaiman, believe it or not, every single person we spoke to were excited to talk to us. They were just happy. They were like, anything but the current guys. And I was saying to the guys we went campaigning together, I said, you know, if you had stayed at the front and if you had walked away because of the seeming threat from those guys, we would have lost an opportunity to speak to thousands of people and tell them about an alternative agenda.
Okay, now let's quickly talk about what the INEC chairman spoke of when he went to Chatham House. He spoke about the population of young Nigerians, the first-time voters and the youth. I want to see how they're working for you, talking about the numbers.
So, look, I deliberately delayed starting my campaign because, and for obvious reasons, we don't have the same resources that the guys who have direct resources from the state have. But something that has been very interesting is the ability to galvanize those guys. When they see a vision that they can follow, they're sold out. On Saturday, we had 200, 300 people. People were actually asking us for them to join us. There are people who met us at the market and just saw and understood what we were saying and immediately started to share flyers out and just joined the band. And that's because it's about, the focus is on the people and it's about the people. So people would ask me, if you go there, what are you going to do? And you're going there to go and enrich yourself. And I'm like, well, you know what? My current business is easier to enrich myself than to go into government as a legislator, you know, to go and do that. No, it's time for Nigerians to understand that we've lost one generation to the politics that we've played in the last 24 years. 2023 is a watershed moment for Nigeria. You've seen the blowout of the NSAS movement, you know, and the impact that has had on us. Look, Sulaiman, let me give you some interesting statistic. Ethiopia probably is the local government that had the worst economic impact from the fallout of NSAS. And I'm not talking about the destruction of roads or the destruction of buildings, no. It's about the fact that majority of the people who left Nigeria as a result of their disenchantment with the Nigerian political system, which was the fallout of the NSAS, left from Ethiopia because that's where they live. So those people would be looking out for what happens in 2023, whether the sacrifices they've made was worth anything. And I think you're going to see that play out in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
I think I should have you come back before election. It's just 30 days to your election.
Yes.
So Femi Oladehin, ADC candidate for Etiosa Federal Constituency, Lagos. Many thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks, Sulaiman. It's an absolute pleasure and I did enjoy it.